This is Matthew Marshall from Portugal.net, and you're listening to the Seleção podcast.
Simões bending one for Torres. Eusebio. Oh my word! Have you ever seen anything like that?
Bem jogado por Simão, a passar por dois adversários. Simão a tentar oferecer o golo a Figo e a bola é golo! O golo da Figo!
Rui Costa já acreditou, vai tirar para o golo, atira, golo! 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 Cristiano Ronaldo, vai para Cristiano Ronaldo! Pepe, bateu, golo! Chuta! Gol!
And we welcome you to episode number 74 of the Seleção podcast. I am your host, Danny Pinto. Thank you so much for tuning in as we've reached another what most of us consider a premature end to another major tournament under the Fernando Santos Cristiano Ronaldo regime here since 2020 or since 2016. Following, and I'm getting already a little bit nostalgic because I mean, by the time this podcast hits your ears, we could have a bit of change going on in the federation, but until that is official, I guess we'll keep everything in terms of real time and talk about these folks as if they are still here. But we, of course, are a proud partner of Portugal.net, and from Portugal.net, we are going to bring on Matthew Marshall here as he is still in Qatar and has done an amazing job of getting coverage and just his articles and recaps of the matches and of practices has been invaluable to us as fans, and we'll get him on here in just a moment. But just remember to get you guys to selecaopod.com. Make sure you bookmark that. Facebook.com/selecaopod. On Instagram and on Twitter, we are at selecaopod, and you can email the show selecaopod@gmail.com. If you've been subscribing to us on any of your podcasting platforms, greatly appreciate that. The downloads reflect it, so we greatly appreciate the support in terms of you guys listening. Really helping out in terms of the viewership on YouTube. If you are watching this as of right now, if you're watching this, remember, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, get those alerts, and make sure that you can get this podcast, the show itself, as visible to all like-minded folks as ourselves who love the game of football, the game of soccer, and love this national team oh so very much. But to talk about this national team, we bring on our good friend Matthew Marshall, and look at that backdrop, Matthew. My goodness, is that real time right now, Matthew? Or are you just in front of? Are you just trying to make a postcard?
That was actually taken around 6 p.m. It gets pretty dark pretty early here, but yeah, that's just the West Bay here in Qatar, where all the action, all the business happens, mate.
Well, talking about business has concluded for our beloved national team and for quite possibly Fernando Santos and Cristiano Ronaldo, maybe Pepe as well. But we'll get to that on the back end of this interview. But let's talk about the quarterfinal loss to Morocco. Obviously, not the way that fans of this national team were hoping that this tournament would end, off the back of just one of the most brilliant performances that the national team has ever displayed, the 6-1 victory against Switzerland in the round of 16. You had injury concerns from the Moroccan side, so that was another pleat in the proverbial positive cape of what could be in this run for Portugal. But it just wasn't meant to be, Matthew, with Portugal just not finding a way to break through what has been an almost impenetrable Moroccan defense. You were there. You've been covering it since day one, since being in Qatar. Give me your summation of what was a very disappointing 1-0 loss for the national team against Morocco.
Yeah, Joao Felix had a good chance early on. It was saved. And then they just tried their best to break Morocco down. As you mentioned, it's almost impossible to score against this team. And then they got hit right before half-time. Cross came in. Dias didn't stop En-Nesyri getting over him, and Diogo Costa came off his line. So a couple of mistakes there. And even before that, Bruno Fernandes losing possession. No one really closing down the left back. So it was a collection of errors really that led to that goal. And then, of course, in the second half, they just dominated it. You saw Santos make some changes with Cancelo, Ronaldo, Leao, all coming off the bench. And again, getting a fair bit of joy down the right-hand side. But really the best chance you would have to say fell to Felix near the end, and it was a great save. A metre to the left, that's probably a goal and an equaliser. And I think there would have only been one winner if that had happened. But just couldn't break Morocco down as Croatia found out, Belgium, Spain, and now Portugal. So you've got to give them a whole lot of credit. They do what they do really well. They turn up, they're organised, and they pose a considerate threat on the counter-attack, which is why I wasn't too disappointed with what Portugal were doing early on. They were trying to be patient, trying to find some routes through to goal. And I thought Morocco showed enough on the counter-attack that you have to respect this team. You can't just go all out at them because they will hurt you. So, Portugal were patient, hoping that they could break through, but they just weren't able to do it. So, as you mentioned, so much hope after that 6-1 victory against Switzerland. Morocco missing a couple of players here, and also their centre-back and captain, Saïs, getting stretched off the pitch before the hour mark. So they overcame a huge amount of hurdles here, personnel-wise, and you just have to give their manager and their team a whole lot of credit. And just, again, disappointment. Portugal had a great chance to make the semi-finals here, but they couldn't quite get it done.
Yeah, we're talking with Matthew Marshall from Portugal.net. He is currently still in Qatar after covering the national team for this, again, a disappointingly, to a lot of Portuguese fans, a shorter tournament than normal, or not than what we expected. But in terms of the match itself, Matthew, the one thing that Fernando Santos said after his in the post game, he said that we just couldn't get to, and I'm paraphrasing here, we just couldn't get off to a quick start. We couldn't penetrate. We couldn't break through. As the manager, isn't it incumbent upon him, on top of the players, because the players obviously have to execute that plan, but when he says something like that, what does that tell you in terms of, was it the wrong strategy? Was it just not executed to what he and what others maybe expected? I guess I guess you identify what the issue was, but as the manager, does it fall upon him ultimately to try to figure that out sooner rather than later?
Well, I mean, you got to consider when they considered the goal. So it was just before the halftime.
It's true. So
if that hadn't have happened, it would have been a different story, I guess. But I mean, the fullbacks are really important in this particular strategy. And I didn't think Rafael Guerreiro had a particularly good game, and it was no surprise to see him taken off when he was. Cancelo tried hard, and of course you saw Dalot get a whole lot of space in the second half. He had a good chance to cut the ball back to Ronaldo, who was completely unmarked, and he crossed it straight to Bruno. So I think the strategy wasn't too bad. As I said, no one else has managed to score against this team. So Santos had his tactics. I'm sure that's why he brought Neves back in to be able to deliver a lot of those long cross-field balls and try and release the fullbacks. You can talk about different personnel, but really when your team wins 6-1, it's not really a whole lot of reason to make many changes. And I think, a lot of people were making that comment about Neves and Danilo. Neves coming in for William. I don't see what that had to do with the result. The goal they considered didn't come through there, and Neves, didn't play more than 50 minutes anyway. So I don't see how that makes any difference. And it's hard to see, what Santos did wrong personnel-wise, considering they smashed Switzerland 6-1. Obviously, this was going to be a different challenge. And in hindsight, you could say a whole lot of things. Obviously Ronaldo will be one of them. I'm sure we'll get onto that. Leao, I guess he could have brought him off the bench maybe a little bit earlier. I probably would have started with Cancelo over Guerreiro. But apart from that, hard to see really what Santos could be blamed for in this match. He He did what he thought was going to work. And again, pretty fine margins. Felix scores early, and those combination of errors don't result in Morocco taking the lead. And we're probably talking about a different result.
And I agree with your sentiment there. Matthew, you've been on the show a few times now, and it's no secret where I stand on Fernando Santos and wanting to not see him be the manager of this team. I think there's been plenty of opportunity for him to either step down or to be let go. But I will say this: I have a lot of trouble seeing direct blame for him on this match. And obviously, the match against South Korea, he did what he needed to do in terms of being a manager. Was it aesthetic? No. No one likes to go to the next round with the loss. But for all intents and purposes, once Portugal went up 1-0 and Uruguay was up 2-0 in the other match, the group was done. So what do you do then? You have to make sure, A, you try not to accumulate any more yellow cards. 2, you try to make sure that there's no injuries. And 3, you get the job done and you win the group. Didn't have an issue with that. Obviously didn't have an issue with 6-1, who would. But even in a loss, when it's so easy to blame the manager, and obviously in a loss, there's usually blame to go around. But I don't think that yesterday was a classic, Fernando Santos blew it, or Fernando Santos couldn't do this, or Fernando Santos couldn't do that. I honestly think that the team did what they tried to do, didn't execute, and got beat by one mistake. And unfortunately, sometimes that situation presents itself in a loss. And it was the most inopportune time in a quarterfinal of the World Cup, with so much positivity riding after that 6-1 victory against Switzerland. But I don't look at Fernando Santos and see him as being, well, he's the reason why Portugal lost in the quarterfinals.
No, and as I say, I think it's easy to watch the game on TV and say, why aren't Portugal just going out there and just attacking Morocco from the get-go, as they did at the beginning of the second half? But it was a completely different situation. Morocco had taken the lead, and they were always going to sit back even deeper then anyway. So it was obvious. But as I said before, I think Morocco showed enough to show that they can play. They can play the ball out from the back, and they're just so good at getting numbers forward. There are numerous times where they broke clear and had 4-on-4 type situations when Portugal tried to press them high, particularly down the left side, which was another reason where I thought Guerreiro let the team down a bit. Wasn't one of his better games. But as I've said before, so many games are decided by fine margins. If Felix's header in the 5th minute is directed on target, if those mistakes don't happen to concede the goal, if Felix's shot, is a meter or so to the left, late on when Ronaldo laid the ball off to him. So there's just a few instances in this game.
Yeah, if that Bruno shot hits 2-3 inches under the crossbar instead of right. Yeah,
so many games of fine margins. And when you listen to Fernando Santos a lot, he's always repeating that word control, control, control. And largely Portugal controlled the game until they conceded. And I just think, maybe some people simplify things too much and just look at what clubs these Moroccan players play for, their value on transfer market, whatever it is, and just think, well, this should be an easy win. But we've already seen that's just not the way it works. And Portugal are just the latest victims of this North African team that are really, it's a great story. It's a great story for the World Cup. But it's not a great story for Portugal, that's for sure.
I was thinking the exact same thing watching it. I'm like, I think it was maybe 10 minutes left to go, and I'm like, this is such a great underdog story, and it should be a story that everyone should be able to enjoy, unless you're the teams that Morocco are picking off throughout this tournament. And they are a great story, and it's they seem to be a very collected and collective unit here, and doing what it takes to get the result. The one thing I always looked at with this match was, I talked with Eric Krakauer in the last episode, and it was like if Spain would have somehow found a way to get through Morocco, I didn't fancy Portugal's chances. Not so much like I didn't think that Portugal could win, but Portugal just didn't have the discipline, or Portugal doesn't have, I should say, the discipline defensively that Morocco has shown throughout this tournament. And I always thought that Portugal could be susceptible to, defending, and then having a breakdown. With Morocco, what I didn't see in the Spain game was what we saw yesterday, yesterday as we record, which was they didn't get out on the counter as much as they did against Portugal as they did against Spain. So it was one of those things where it's like, maybe Morocco is just in this thing to just suffer and just make sure that they don't allow anything. And if there is a jailbreak, you hit the jailbreak if you can. But there's not so much a point or a question to follow up with this, Matthew. It's just one of those things where it's like, what was the hope that could happen for Portugal just didn't end up being, and now there are some serious kind of logistical and consequences of what happens here, because as someone who is very confident when his job security has been questioned, instead of Fernando Santos letting everybody know that he has a contract through 2024, to paraphrase, he said, I'm going to talk to the Federation on Monday and we'll see how it goes. Did that response at all kind of signal to you that the end may be near for Fernando Santos as the manager of this national team?
If I was him, I'd be just so tired of the questions he continually gets asked in press conferences and the press in Portugal and a lot of the stuff that they go on about with Ronaldo. I thought the last one about him threatening to quit the squad was ridiculous. And the continual sort of stories coming out of the media that just basically unsettles his team or tries to unsettle his team and just introduce a whole lot of negativity when it should be more solidarity and positivity. You can see why would he want to just keep putting up with that despite having 2 years to go on his contract. I just think personally it's probably not worth it for him. That it's just not going to go anywhere. And sitting in that press conference yesterday, there are a few things that happened that I'm not going to go into, but I sent the Portuguese press officer a message today just wishing him, his family, and Fernando Santos a nice Christmas and New Year break, and said at times I'm just ashamed to be part of this Portuguese press contingent and some of the stuff they just continually go on about. I think it's pretty depressing. So if I was Fernando Santos, I'm assuming that he's thinking, what's the point in this? But I think we also need to talk about this Ronaldo situation, because I think it's quite linked to Fernando Santos. Have they fallen out? Has their relationship suffered after what happened against South Korea? You would have to think so. So, of course, Ronaldo's position in the squad isn't like it was. Maybe that will have an influence on what the FPF are thinking. I've also become aware that Santos probably doesn't have the full backing of the hierarchy there at the FPF. And he might just be thinking, with Pep gone and Ronaldo coming to his end and the unlikelihood of him getting a contract past 2024, maybe this is just a good time to step away, but we won't find out until the coming days. Of course, we've seen a few managers, no longer managing their teams after going out of this World Cup. So that's my initial thought with Santos, is that he probably won't think it's worth all the hassle and all the negativity that's just going to keep coming his way. But we'll have to wait and see what happens.
So you think that if there is a change, and again, I'm not trying to pin you to this or anything, but you think it would be more of a resignation than a firing? Or is it a resign or else we'll fire you?
I don't think it would come to that.
Gut feeling.
No, I think it'd be more him just saying, I've had enough, basically. And, let's just, you don't have to pay me for the extra 2 years. Let's just end it like that. I think it would be more like that rather than the FPF saying, look, resign so that it doesn't look like we've sacked you. We already know that the terms of his contract and he's, he has to just keep getting Portugal to the major tournaments and getting out of the knockout stage. and here he was close to getting to the semi-final. So on that basis, it was job done. So they don't have a basis to sack him on that level. They could say, oh, well, you failed against Morocco, but we just discussed the reasons why they're such a hard team to beat. I don't think they would go at it from that point of view. They could, as I said, they could use this Ronaldo situation against him, maybe. But I think Ronaldo just brought that on himself. I think that what he did when he got subbed against South Korea. I still can't believe it, to be honest, but everyone I've spoken to has basically verified that it was true what he said coming off the bench, and it was directed at Santos. So I still can't believe that Ronaldo would do that, especially in a nothing game. But after the Piers Morgan interview, we already know the ego is pretty big, and maybe it just got way out of control in that situation. Maybe Santos was looking for a reason to bench him anyway. Who knows? But that's one of the reasons I could think that the FBF would use against Santos, and maybe it should have started him against Morocco. But it's just all hindsight, Danny. I mean, you're saying all this in hindsight,
Sure.
He took Ronaldo,
we'll never
brings
know.
Ramos in, and he scores a hat-trick. So you can look at it. It was a genius move. You know what I mean? But yeah, I would say it would more come down to what Santos wants. But it's going to be an interesting conversation with the FBF. I wish I was a fly on the wall, that's for sure.
Well, Portugal has already returned. The national team has already returned to Portugal. I saw some pictures. I'm not sure if it's from the FPF or not, but players taking pictures with fans awaiting them from the motorcade, and it's a very, very interesting time, Matthew, that we eventually knew was coming. Ronaldo's 37, Pepe is 39. Fernando Santos has a contract, but he's in his mid-70s. This is what feels like an end of an era in Portuguese football. Rui Patricio, part of 2016. João Mario, part of 2016. William, part of 2016. But, the majority of this team, not part of that 2016 European championship. And I'm sure I'm forgetting one or two here. But does there seem to be a feeling of finality on your end when it comes to the major players of this national team for the last almost decade?
It does with Pepe and Ronaldo for sure. I mean, Pepe yesterday, his arm was busted bad, and
it was reported it was a forearm fracture, correct?
Yeah, and he was holding it, and he wanted to get off, but all the substitutions had been made, and he just kept battling on with one arm, and he almost scored the equaliser with that header at the back post. So it really was a fitting end to his international career, just putting it all on the line, and it's going to be an image I'll never forget of just seeing him with basically a broken arm. And yeah, it was just incredible. And Ronaldo, we've talked about him and his powers as a football player diminishing. And as I mentioned, that incident with South Korea was incredible. I still can't believe it's happened like that. And yeah, of course, those two guys and Santos going out together would be quite a significant thing. We just don't even know what's going to happen with Ronaldo as far as his next club goes and his form goes. And if Santos stays, how does he use him? If a new manager comes in, what happens then? But you'd have to think if Santos does stay, then what he's done with Ronaldo here, as far as benching him, means that his position as a indisputable starter is certainly gone anyway. So a whole lot of questions, Danny. I don't think I have all the answers. We'll just have to wait and see what happens. But it is interesting when you look at Portugal's squad. There are a whole lot of players around that sort of 27, 28 range who probably have one World Cup left in them. But yeah, a lot of young talent coming through. And whatever happens, the future is certainly bright for the Seleção, continuing to qualify for major tournaments, continuing to get out of the group stage. And, you just need so many things to go your way to win an international tournament. Very, very, very difficult. We had Nuno Mendes going down was brutal.
Yeah.
He would have been really useful in this match against Morocco, and we didn't have Diogo Jota, of course. He would have been another guy pretty useful. And yeah, just a couple of things in this Morocco game sort of didn't work out. But yeah, we'll just wait and see, mate. We'll wait and see, and yeah, what the future holds for the managerial position, and also, I'm sure Pep's gone, but yeah, Ronaldo, we'll wait and see.
Yeah, I'd be, I think I saw a tweet, and I don't remember who it was from or anything, but there was a picture of Pep and Ruben Dias. This is maybe weeks ago, maybe months ago, I don't know, but it made me chuckle in regards to Pep, where the question is, has been, who's going to be the next guy standing next to Ruben Dias in the middle of that defense, and it was a nice quip. It's like, are we so sure that Pep isn't going to outlast Ruben Dias the way that he keeps going? I mean, Pep, and I was very weary of his not only availability, but just being able to still do it at 39, given that leading up to the World Cup, Matthew, he hadn't been playing much of any matches for Porto, and at 39, these knocks get a little bit longer to come back from, or they just become more frequent. But I don't know if I've ever, I would say that Ronaldo's the talent, but Pep has been the heart of this national team for now almost a decade and a half. And if it was his last go around, I think his absence is going to be far. I don't want to compare absences, but I just want to say, for Pep, I think his absence is going to be far greater than maybe people realize in terms of locker room and leadership for this national team.
Yeah, just a monster performance at this World Cup, and in a way, a fitting way for him to go out. Really, I'll just never forget what I saw from Pep and his busted arm. But I just wanted to bring up, of course, there's been massive criticism of Fernando Santos, and I've said, well, the players also need to take a whole lot of responsibility. I think a lot of them are a bit soft, and they're just the product of their generation in many ways. Fernando Santos is not the father of all these guys. He's not responsible for a lot of their. Can I steal one from Eric? The testicular fortitude. And I think that's a significant thing to think about, is that a lot of these players are a similar age, similar sort of generation. And Pep obviously represents a different generation, he's a lot older, and he seems to have a different mentality to a lot of these guys who could really take a leaf out of his book. And, we're going to lose a whole lot of not only player ability in a key position, but also mental strength, toughness, and leadership. And he's going to be sorely missed, that's for sure.
Yeah, the old adage, they don't make them like they used to, I think is perfect for Pep here. And I think he will be missed. If there's a way to get him some sort of farewell game before the Euros, or before the qualification for the Euros start again in March of next year, I'm all for it. I think there's some sort of FIFA window, international window, I think in January, but I'd have to double check that. But yeah, a hero's goodbye, I think, is what that man deserves, as well as Ronaldo whenever that comes. I have been of the opinion, Matthew, that you can put up with the antics of Ronaldo when he's banging 2 or 3 goals like he used to. And I mean, really, the attitude hasn't really been that different from 37 to 27 to 31 to Euros to World Cups, whatever. But it is a lot to take, I think, as a fan, and I'm just talking about me personally. It's a lot for me to take when the guys that you're playing with now, and I in the South Korea game was a perfect example. These were wholesale changes for Fernando Santos was making, getting these younger guys a little bit of run, getting them a little bit of tournament time in a match that 15 minutes in no longer mattered. Yet the reaction to not getting every single cross and every single pass that he felt he should have gotten and showing up his teammates and then not really taking any accountability on camera, and I don't know what he said in the locker room, but really not taking any accountability visually for the blunder that was the South Korean first goal when it just comes off his shoulder and he ducks like he's playing dodgeball. It's been a really disappointing, I don't want to say end because we don't know, but it just has been a very disappointing period in for me watching him wearing the national team jersey. And I don't know how long he still has left with this national team. We don't know what he's going to be doing for his club team. Don't know how serious that $200 million a year contract offer is from Saudi Arabia. But and you mentioned the reaction, and I'll have to ask you off air as you professionally will not say what happened. But I just have been disappointed in how it's potentially ending, because for everything that he is in terms of being an egomaniac and a just look at me player, it's also what has driven him to be one of the greatest players in the history of this game. And I would just hate the for his end to be remembered more than what has been such a tremendous career and a once in a lifetime career, on top of all the philanthropic stuff that he does that no one ever talks about. And it just sucks, Matthew, to just put it out there. It just sucks that this is the way that it potentially is ending for one of the greats of Portugal and of the game. It's just sad.
I think it happens in so many sports. These legends, it's very hard to go out, and not many players get to go out on top, and so many times he's come back and proven people wrong and come back and been a match winner. And in his mind, it's just still the same thing. And to be fair, he won and scored the penalty against Ghana, and he was influential in the opening goal against Uruguay. And yeah, this situation against South Korea, that's basically forced Santos to drop him. I just still can't believe it. How he would fall out with Santos, a guy that's always had his back, a guy that talked in the press conference about knowing him since he was a teenager and the good relationship they have. It reminds me of some of these movies, Danny, where Scarface or something, where there's just no stopping the ego. There's just no stopping it. It's relentless. And who are we to know what it's like to be Ronaldo and to have lived his life and to have done the things he's done and to have to put up with the non-stop intrusion and criticism and speculation.
Matthew, could you imagine being arguably the most recognized person in the entire world and living that? I've followed rock and roll a lot, and I know a lot of the downfalls of a lot of those guys and being super famous and the ego getting out of control. So, it's a similar type thing. Obviously not on the scale of Ronaldo. So none of us can know what it's like to be in his shoes and how hard it must be for him to be losing some of his physical and footballing, abilities that have just made him the best. He and Messi, the best players on the planet. And he's broken, I don't know how many different records. He broke another one here, of course, being the first player to score in 5 consecutive World Cups. It just keeps breaking records. So yeah, we can move on from Cristiano Ronaldo for sure and just see what happens with his new club and see what the future holds for him with Seleção. Of course, Ramos has announced himself, and I'm not sure how Andre Silva feels about that, how much game time he'll get in the coming years, and if Ramos can hold his form. But there's still not a whole lot of options. Of course, João Felix not really an out-and-out striker. So I don't know, mate. We'll just have to wait and see. But for sure, certainly bizarre what happened in South Korea and Santos dropping Ronaldo because of that reason. I just still can't believe it. As we finish up here, Matthew, again, as of this recording, Fernando Santos is still very much the manager, and there has been no international retirements. But how do you view this team going forward? And let's just go ahead and let's play make believe, and it could be real in a few days' time here. A national team without Fernando Santos at the helm, without Pep in the at the center of the defense, without Ronaldo up top, there is still, and you mentioned the the amount of talent that is still at least for maybe at least one more go at a World Cup, probably a couple of Euros, but without those three pillars, I guess, and I think they are pillars of this national team, obviously for the last 15 years. Where do you think that this team can go in the next? We mentioned the Euros for qualifying, the qualifying for the Euros starting in March. We could see a bunch of changes, but in terms of the talent, in terms of what this team can still do potentially, where do you think that this current crop of players and this talent are left with going forward with this federation?
It's going to be really difficult to replace those two guys, but I think they can still qualify. They can still, put themselves in contention to get to the knockout rounds in the major tournaments. I think it's going to be a crucial 4 years because, as I said, so many of those guys are around 28. So they'll be, 32 next World Cup. It'll be probably a lot of them their last World Cup. So it's going to be interesting to see it as a cycle from that perspective. And if a new manager comes in, he probably won't play Danilo in central defense. So you're going to have to see.
I don't think that was a joke, Matthew, but he
hasn't been too bad. I don't think he's really
bad.
Made
he hasn't
mistakes.
been bad. It's the whole thing about, we have all this youth that, again, youth is one thing. If they're ready to go is another. But yeah, it's just, I don't know why that made me laugh. It just made me laugh. Sorry about that.
Yeah. So obviously the other, we've talked about Jalot, Inacio, Carmo. One of those guys, or maybe two, comes in and shows what they can do. But of course, Nuno Mendes is just fantastic. Dalot has really come on really well. He's only 23. So those fullback positions really covered for a long time. Diogo Costa had some difficult moments at the World Cup, but he's been sensational. I mean, there's not many starting goalkeepers at the World Cup at 23 years old, Danny. So you've got to cut him a little bit of slack. And then midfield stacked. Ruben Neves has got a lot of time under Santos. Also, Otavio, does a new manager sort of ditch that and maybe give Palhinha a whole lot more time? Vitinha's coming through. He's looking sensational. So he's still going to get some really good years from Bernardo, Bruno Fernandes. Rafael Leao is coming in. Tom and I have discussed some of his issues at length, but he's only 23. He's got a long time to sort them out. Joao Felix, I thought he was sensational in the opening game, and of course against Switzerland. You've got Diogo Jota to come back in. If Gonçalo Ramos can keep, powering ahead, I'm sure there's going to be a whole lot of clubs looking at him. Then the signs are good. And then, just like to look at the next wave of youngsters coming through to put some pressure on. I've been disappointed, of course, with my mate Fabio Vieira going to Arsenal and not getting any game time. But there's still a lot of talent coming through, and we'll just have to wait and see what happens and how they develop and how this team takes shape. But for sure, central defence is going to be very interesting, one of the most interesting things to really keep an eye on. And, of course, what happens in the absence of Ronaldo? Who takes up that mantle? Who becomes a leader up front? And who bangs in the goals? Because that's obviously a key. So I'm still positive, of course, Danny. I'm still, it's been a rough day. Of course, we have to mention the death of Grant Wahl. I
was going to ask you that, but yeah, go ahead.
I mean, I've been really lucky here to bump into a lot of journos that I've seen and heard and read their work over many years. I had a nice chat with Guillaume Balaguer, who was sharing a house with Grant Wahl.
Oh my God!
I've already met James Horncastle in Porto. I had a really good chat with Sid Lowe, Julian Nerons, Jim White, and Grant Wahl was on my list. I was just expecting I would bump into him at any moment, and I was just going to tell him the same as I told the other guys. Huge fan of your work, really respect what you do, and he's if not one of the best journalist at this entire World Cup. I don't think that's a huge exaggeration. He was getting down and dirty and uncovering a whole lot of the truth here in Qatar, and just devastating. I mean, I was at the game where he died, and woke up to that news on the day of Portugal going out of the World Cup. So, as I mentioned in my pre-match vid there and in my report, this is just another reminder that football is just a game, and Portugal have lost here. We're out of the World Cup, and that sucks. But if you think it's bad sitting there at home, with your partner and your kids or your dog or your cat or your canary or whatever it is, mate, it sucks even worse when you're here, trust me. So, we have to think about him and how lucky we are to still be living and breathing and on this planet and able to enjoy more football, more games for the Seleção, more international tournaments, because life is short and it can disappear at any moment.
Yeah, well said. Grant was also one of those guys that I was hoping that one day would be able to I would be able to cross paths with him on this podcast. And again, like you so eloquently said, he was one of the best, not only American journalists covering the game, just one of the best journalists for the sport. And I guess I'll ask you this, Matthew. Being on assignment as far away from home as you are, you and I are we're not social friends. We come and talk football, but I don't know much about you personally, nor do you know much about me personally. But I can only imagine that, like, even if you're feeling homesick when you're that far away, it can kind of take a toll on you when you're on assignment. When something like this happens, I guess what was like maybe your first thought of, like, just the feeling of having a colleague go down so far away from home, passing away, and knowing that, I guess there's no guilt in being around still, but at the same time, it's like you were doing the same thing he was doing, and it's like that's got to at least play a bit with your emotions and figuring out, like, there is no sensible answer as to why life happens, but you must feel some sort of something, and it's the worst kind of analogy there, but I can only imagine what you feel being there and it happening with Grant doing the same thing you were doing.
That's exactly it. You're basically in exactly the same boat. He's a little bit older than me, but some of the things he'd been talking about, as far as not getting enough sleep, and that contributing to him not feeling so well. I was in hospital 10 days before coming to Qatar, Danny. I had an operation, and I was spent one night in hospital, and I had a really rough day here, where I thought, I'm going to have to go to the doctor here. But fortunately, a couple of really long, good nights of sleep kind of got me through that. So, yeah, as I said, I didn't cross paths with him, and it's a massive media contingent here, mate. It's huge. But still, it just doesn't matter. You just feel the connection to another journalist here, just doing the same thing. Loves football, loves, reporting on football, talking to players, talking to managers. He's on a different level to me, doing a different thing, but exactly right. You're in exactly the same boat, and it could have been me. And, I think a lot of people have had those situations where people have died and you think could have been me, just something unlucky, some random thing. And of course, what makes it even a little bit worse, in a way, if it could be any worse, is the fact that he was, just didn't compromise. And in a world where journalism has just become so ridiculous and fake and all about clicks, and the essence of what journalism is has really been lost, he was the guy keeping it real. He was the guy really showing what proper journalism is: selfless, taking risks, and no fear, absolutely no fear. And, for it to be him, out of all the hundreds, maybe thousands journalists here, for it to be him, just still blowing my mind, mate. Still blowing my mind.
Yeah. Our thoughts and prayers with Grant's family and everyone who, his family, his friends, his colleagues, anyone who read him, anyone who followed him. It's a huge loss for the profession, for those who love the sport. And that was a tough pill for sure. And yeah, not sure how we transition out of that, Matt, other than to tell you.
You got to bring me the what is it? The Hopium Den?
Oh yeah, well they're out of the World Cup now, Matthew. The Hopium Den is it's shut. Okay, let's talk. Listen, I tried to get that Hopium Den thing going, and I just it was I don't force.
I thought I invented it.
Well, maybe you have. Maybe there's you built it. Yeah. There's a lot of things that I try. I mean, I don't try to force too many things in this show. I try to make it as free flowing as possible. That Hopium Den just never felt natural, and I'm actually kind of glad that it's shut down here. But I will say a thank you to you, because I thank you, and maybe and I'm sorry, because I think the last time I had you on, I think I asked you straight up. I'm like, so were you going to Qatar? And I don't know if that was already kind of in the plans and you couldn't say anything, but I'm so I think as fans of this national team, and English speaking fans of this national team, it was one of the reasons why I wanted to start this podcast years ago was Tom's coverage and Portugal.net, and just being a first generation born Portuguese person. My dad instilling in me the love of football, the love of my culture, and then as I got in my 20s and early 30s, following Tom and being able to, again, it's to me it's the thing that I love about Tom's site is there's nuance that gets lost for me personally with the Portuguese language that I just miss out, because maybe the meaning in which it was said, or maybe a colloquialism that I don't pick up, or whatever it is. The English speaking part obviously made more sense to me, and I understood more, and it gave me another connection to this national team. And then having you this go around, actually being in Qatar, kind of just cements the whole reason why I'm still doing this right now out of my house, because there's a love there for not so much the national team, but just like for the profession and wanting to do this. And for me, I just a huge thank you to you for heading to Qatar. Not the easiest of assignments in more ways than one, and that's another topic for another show. But just a huge thank you to you, all the work you've done leading up to this. I've loved seeing your role with Portugal.net grow over the last couple of years, and for you to be there, and the podcast you did with Tom at the wee hours of your morning, and we'll pull back the curtain here as we record this. It is 3:45 in the morning in Qatar, and Matthew is a spring chicken over there. He is he is given us some time, and just I greatly appreciate the work you've done and the coverage you've given and the perspective you've given from Qatar. I wish we had a few more matches for you to cover and a few more practices for this national team. But just a huge obrigado from me and what I know is a large contingent of English speaking Portuguese fans that have really enjoyed your work and enjoyed you being out there.
Yeah, thanks, mate. I mean, I had to find a niche for myself somehow, and I remember talking to you after the last under-21 championship, and after that I did the under-17 Euros, and I really loved seeing that and seeing all these players coming through. Gonçalo Ramos, I've seen him so many times, and I'm so glad I wasn't born in Portugal, because I just try not. It is a cultural thing that pessimism and negativity is very real in Portugal, and I don't bring that to the table. And I just can't. I've never owned a pair of jeans, mate. I don't like to fit in. I just I just try and just find my own little way through, and it might not be, it's definitely not economically rewarding, financially rewarding, but that's not why I'm doing it, man. I just do it because I love football. I love Portugal. I came to know my Portuguese heritage a lot later than most people.
Would you mind sharing that? Because I don't know if we've ever gone over that on this podcast.
Well, my father's Portuguese, but
Okay.
I met him for the first time when I was 27.
Oh, wow.
Which is when I moved to Portugal. I lived with my grandmother in the Algarve. I worked in tourism for a few years, on and off. And then, I went back recently to live. I'm living in the north of Portugal now in a really quiet, nice area. But that's one of the reasons why my pronunciation drifts in and out. But now I'm starting to learn Portuguese properly. But I didn't know anything of Portugal really for a long time. But I always knew my father was Portuguese, and I started following Portuguese, I think, Portuguese football for the first time around 2000, 2004. And then since then, I really identify with the culture. You probably heard some of my podcasts. I've been almost everywhere in Portugal, been Madeira, a couple of the islands in the Azores, been to Macau. I've amassed quite a huge library on Portuguese history, educated myself on those sorts of things, and really quite passionate about that, and really feel a connection to it through 50% of my blood. Because in Australia, as a white person, you don't really have a connection to the history of the land. It's only the Aboriginal, Indigenous people there that do that. So Portugal has sort of given me that ability to understand that half of my heritage goes back a long way in a particular part of the world that I'm a lot more proud of than I am with my Australian roots, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And living back there again, I really love the culture. I've lived in Germany for a while, which wasn't particularly enjoyable. And we're just looking forward to doing more stuff with the Seleção. I don't really even want to be a journalist, Danny. I just do it to sort of get inside the machine and get access, and I really enjoy that. And but I got to say, being part of this huge machine here hasn't been the most enjoyable experience. I was the only journalist at the Under-17 European Championship. They didn't send one journalist from Portugal, so I was the only one there. And I prefer that. I prefer to sort of feel like I'm the only one there and doing my thing. And I've got a couple of tournaments lined up next summer. I'm locked in for the Under-21 Euros in Georgia. I think Portugal have got a really good chance to win that, so hopefully I can come on and talk to you after they lift that trophy. And I'm already locked into some of these European qualifiers. I'm going to Iceland. I'll be going to Bosnia and doing as many games as I can. Under-21 qualifiers. You've got the Under-17, Under-19 elite round qualifiers coming in March. So I'll just keep doing what I'm doing and going to all these low-key stadiums. I'm trying to get to every first division, second division, third division stadium in Portugal. I've already knocked off a few fourth division stadiums, but I just have to keep it interesting. I've got to keep it interesting. As I said, it's not financially rewarding at all, but I'm not in it for that, man. I'm in it for me. I'm in it to keep myself active and to have fun. And if it's not fun, I don't do it. I'm really lucky that Tom is a colleague, not a boss. Like, no one tells me where to go, what to do, what to say. So I've got complete freedom, and I'm just having a good time with it. Although these days are hard, mate. Like, waking up today, getting out of bed, it was not easy. And the Grant Wahl thing just made it even tougher. But life is just full of ups and downs. You get knocked down, you just got to get back up and go again. And that's what I'll be doing shortly.
Well, and we'll be all the better for it. Watching and listening and reading all your stuff. You mentioned jeans real quick. In 2026, it's very far away, but if you are lucky enough to get the assignment and you come out to Levi's Stadium in Santa Clara, California, which will be one of the stadiums that has the World Cup. I live about 90 minutes away. You don't have to worry about hotels, dude. We will go together. A casa tá às ordens, as they say in Portuguese. You've got free room and board. We'll do the podcast from this room right here. It's going to be phenomenal in 2026 with you and me on the same microphone in the same room, Matthew. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that'd be good, mate. I've got my eyes on that tournament, obviously, for sure. And it's been bizarre here with all the games so close together. I've been to, I think, 24, 25 games. I've got accreditation come through for the Croatia, Argentina, and hopefully the other semi and the final, although it's not great. I've already experienced that at the Under-17 European Championship. All you're thinking of is this should be Portugal here. I mean, it's very, very hard to enjoy these games.
Sure.
Even if I get to the World Cup final, it's not going to be that enjoyable. Trust me, because I'll be thinking this should have been Portugal. But yeah, for sure. Hopefully, the fixtures work out for Portugal and they qualify and everything goes well for the next World Cup, and that'd be great. Of course, Nathan Motes is another guy who's a big part of Portugal. He's over there, so
absolutely,
if everything lines up, the three of us can get together, and that's really what makes this football journey enjoyable. It's the connections, it's the friendships you make. And I've found that, meeting people at these tournaments, particularly under 17, such a tight-knit group there with the press officer. And if you listen to my podcast, you listen to the interviews I did with there, and you make these lifelong friendships. And that's really one of the most enjoyable parts of what I've been doing, is meeting people and making friends and connecting with people and sharing some of these memories. So, yeah, looking forward to it, mate. That'd be good. You can show me some of the local cuisines and the sightseeing action, so that'll be good.
We won't be hitting up any fish fries, I don't think, like you and Tom like to do before going to any of these qualifiers. But we'll
maybe beer will be affordable over there, mate. Because I lived the high life here. I went out with a girl at one of these ridiculous hotels. I just felt like I was walking into a Twilight Zone or something. It was ridiculous. But it was good to sort of get that high life. But seriously, the cost of things over here is it's just ridiculous, and making it a bit sad that you just can't just go out to a normal place and just have a beer as you would, But hopefully we'll make up for that.
Yeah, we have an ugly term right now going on in the States. It's called inflation, and it's not great right now. But hopefully it'll get rectified here in 2026. When you, me, and Nathan are all together in 2026, who's going to be the manager of this national team? I'll put you on the spot right now. Don't say Zé Mourinho. It's no. It's not, well, who the hell knows? I know you're big.
It has to be
at some point, right?
Has to be.
Is he? Do you think they can pry him from Roma?
Hope so. I mean, that'll come into their thinking. Of course, you never want to sack a manager without having another guy lined up. But we've seen with a lot of international teams, you don't really hire international managers on the short term. For sure, Mourinho will be Portugal manager. You can bank it. It's just a matter of when. Like I say, it's only a matter of when everything lines up. For sure, the FPF will call him and ask him what he thinks and if he wants it, and it'll be up to him. But wait and see. But if they hire someone else and Mourinho's there in 2026, that means that next Euro ain't going to go well. So
that's true. Yeah, if there's been a buffer in the between Santos and Mourinho, yeah, maybe the Euros didn't go as planned. Matthew, get some rest. Enjoy the semifinals. Hopefully, you can enjoy the final. There's not a lot of people in this world, Matthew, that can say that they've been to World Cup semifinals or a final, although it may not be as enjoyable as it could have been if Portugal was there. Definitely relish the opportunity, and we can't wait to get you back to Portugal in qualifiers for Euros starting in March. So rest easy. Man. I know you got some club stuff obviously coming back too, but just keep up the great work, Matthew, and we can't wait to have you back on.
Cheers, mate. Yeah, I don't take anything for granted. If I get to the semi-finals and final, that is obviously massive. But I'm sure you can understand it's just not the same after what's happened to Portugal. You heavily invested. But thanks for all the kind words, and I just want to wish you, your family, all the listeners. Eric, I thought he did a great job. I really enjoyed that last one you guys did. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Forza indeed. All right, that has been Matthew Marshall. Make sure you follow him on Twitter at Noobs. You know what? Before I get you, Noobs Corp, I gotta ask, what does it mean, Matthew? News Corp
because I can't pronounce it, and it's
News Corp is a massive media. Rupert Murdoch, basically dominate all the media ownership, not only in Australia but a lot of other parts of the world, and it's just a play on that. It's just a play on. I used to play a fair few shoot 'em ups, and that's where I found out. I used to own a lot of noobs.
Nice.
So that's just a mixture of those two things.
We got to know a little bit of Matthew Marshall on this episode. I like that. All right, but
Headshot.
All right, but all the best to you, and again, great work out there, and safe travels back home.
Cheers, mate. Take it easy.
All right, that has been Matthew Marshall here on episode number 74 of the Seleção podcast. Again, who knows? By the time you guys are listening to this, we could have I wouldn't say a new manager. I would just say that it could be a decision on the future of Fernando Santos, and who's to say we won't get that from Pepe and Cristiano Ronaldo as well. And who knows? I mean, Rafa's retirement came out of nowhere. We could see maybe numerous, or I should say other changes. But again, as we talked about it with Matthew, it's this part of the Portuguese national team's history was coming at some point. There would be an end of the Fernando Santos era. Could be now. Likely the end of the Pep era. Who knows what the CR7 era still has in a Portugal shirt. But as I mentioned to Matthew, there seemed to be a sort of finality to the loss to Morocco in terms of the big picture of what has been the most successful and maybe even frustrating as well, because we wanted so much more and we thought we could get so much more, but it was for naught at this point. So we'll see what happens in the next few days, what the federation decides to do with Fernando Santos and what may be next for Pep, for Cristiano Ronaldo, and maybe some other players here with the national team. But that will do it for episode number 74 of the Seleção podcast. Again, my thanks to Matthew Marshall of Portugal.net. You can follow Matthew on Twitter at NoobsCorp. That's NoobzCorp. If you haven't been listening to him and Tom Kundert's Portugal podcast, they have been tremendous listens. And again, another outlet for us English-speaking Portuguese fans, English-speaking Portuguese descendants, and filhos de imigrantes. And again, it's a passion project, as I've said this many a time, and it's one that while I have not done the traveling nor been able to get out to national team matches, I wear it on my heart. I've tattooed it on my arm. As you can see here, if you guys have never seen that one before, and I can't figure out how to work my camera, but there it is. It's right there, as if it's under my flesh. It's shout out to Ian Carter, my tattoo guy. But I love this team, and you never want it to end this way, and you always want it to end in absolute glory, and it just wasn't to be for us. A quick anecdote. So I was at a family wedding this weekend, and I was watching the match with my wife, my two boys, in our hotel room. And I brought the hat, Jersey brought a flag, and I have a picture of my son, of my 7-year-old son, and he's just wrapped himself around. I'm getting a little emotional here. He's wrapped himself around the Seleção flag that I purchased, and he's 7. He's still figuring out sports. My 5-year-old, I'll tell you his response in a couple of seconds here. But he's getting to know the game and getting to know that, Portugal's our team, and he's all in, and he, for the last, I would say 15 minutes, he's just, his eyes are welling up, and he's like, "Pi, Portugal's going to lose." And I'm just like, "Hey, but we don't talk like that. We fight until the end. We fight until the end." And I think we fought until the end, but it just wasn't for us. And when the whistle blew, he just yelled, "Oh no!" And he came to me and he hugged me and he started sobbing. And I haven't cried over a sporting event since 2016, when they were tears of joy. And I sat and I bent down on my knees and I hugged him so we could be at eye level, and I cried with him. And I don't cry for nothing. And I know that there was probably some tears shed around the world regarding this match. And again, it is just sports, but it is something that unites us, and it's one of the things that's united my son and I. And I just held him, and I just let him cry, and he cried for a good half an hour after. And I just kept telling him, "Hey, We've got another chance. He's Ronaldo's gone. He knows that it could be the end. I'm like, listen, just because players change doesn't mean that our love for the team doesn't changes too. And we are in a very again, it's a mode of transition maybe, or a time of transition for this national team. But the one thing that will not change for me is the passion that I have for this national team, the passion that I have for doing this podcast, and for getting people like Matthew and like Tom and Eric, and the opportunity to speak with Derek Ray during this World Cup was an absolute delight, and something that I am so grateful for. And a lot of that is because of the response I get from you guys, because we share in this passion, because we share in the love of this national team. And the fact that you guys have allowed this podcast to continue to grow as it does is something that warms my heart, because to me, you guys are like me. You guys have the love. You guys have the passion for this team, and have found it in this outlet that I'm lucky enough to provide to you guys, and will continue to do so for as long as I possibly can. So for that, I thank you. And I appreciate all the love, all the disagreements we can have sometimes on this platform, or regarding the show on Twitter and everything. Because I mean, if we all felt the same way and thought the same way, it'd be pretty boring. So I love the discourse. I love the opinions, and it'll be very interesting to see what happens here in the next 24 to 48 hours, depending on when you're hearing this podcast. But huge thank you to you guys, and we'll have a year in review show later this month. But I'll keep just keep listening, keep following, have the alerts set on your devices, on your browsers, because if big time breaking news hits, I want you guys to be looking for me to deliver my opinion, as well as the opinion of those who are in it as well. So that's it. So that has been episode number 74 of the Seleção podcast. We are a proud partner of Portugal.net, and I'll just end it the way I always end it, guys. Força Portugal!